Hi guys, so today's video is going to be another installment of my makeup and mystery series. I couldn't find tons and tons on this case, but I did manage to find a little bit. I couldn't find exact dates on a lot of things, and a lot of things weren't documented, so a lot of it is just kind of presumption, so sorry about that one. This talks a lot about poison and children and adults, so if that will trigger you in any way, I would probably say exit the video now. So yeah, if not, let's just jump on into the video. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing my brows, so same as normal, I'll put a link up somewhere for you guys to see my routine. Nothing's really changed.
I lost my best friend to 23. I heard the heavens crying above me. The gain's an angel, I lost a friend. I felt like dying again and again. I went through hell instead of death.
Okay, so this case is about Mary Ann Cotton. So Mary Ann Cotton was a British nurse and housekeeper. So Mary Ann Cotton is believed to be Britain's most prolific female serial killer, and she was born October the 31st, 1832 at Low Moorsley. I think that's how you pronounce it. So in 1834, so only 2 years later, her little sister Margaret was born, but sadly Margaret died a few months later, and the year after that, so 1835, her little brother Robert was born. Now at the age of 8, her family moved to County Durham, and sadly soon after that her father sadly in 1842 died, and then the year after that, so 1843, her mother remarried someone named George Scott. So Margaret from a young age already knew loss. She already lost her little sister and her father, and her mother had moved on fairly quickly as well. So Mary Ann at the age of 16 actually left home to become a nurse. However, 3 years later she returned to become a dressmaker. It's not clear what happened there, why she came back to change careers from a nurse to a dressmaker, but she did. So in 1852 Mary Ann was 20 and she actually got married. At the age of 20, Mary Ann married William Mowbray. I think that's how you pronounce it. Again, I'm not good with names, as you probably know by now, so I do apologise. However, once again, due to lack of documentation about Mary Ann's life is up for debate and speculation, but it is believed that within just a few years they had already had several children. Now in 1858 they had a daughter, Isabel, and their daughter that they already had, Margaret Jane, which I couldn't find any documentation for, actually died in 1860, so 2 years after Isabella was born. Now they had another daughter in 1861, also called Margaret Jane, so Margaret Jane II, and then in 1863 they had a son, John Robert William. However, a year after he was born, he died of gastric fever. Now that's something that happens quite a lot throughout this story, is gastric fever. So William actually ended up taking out a life insurance policy against himself and the children that remained, as the others had all sadly passed away from gastric fever.
The warmth inside me kept me afloat. It felt like heaven.
Now gastric fever was actually quite a common illness, and it had similar symptoms to arsenic poisoning. So if someone got that at the time, they would not likely assume that it was arsenic poisoning and just assume pretty much straight away that it was gastric fever, even though the symptoms are quite similar. But back then people didn't really think about looking into stuff like that as much as we would. But as Mary Ann was a nurse, she already knew all this, and she knew the symptoms.
I lost my best friend to 23. I heard the heavens.
Okay, so in 1864 gastric fever also then took William's life, and Mary Ann collected the life insurance for their children and William. I'm just going to take some bronzer and put that into the crease. So once Marianne had collected the life insurance, so after Marianne had collected the life insurance, she left her daughter Margaret Jane II and one of her other children in the care of her mother, and she began a short relationship with Joseph Natres. Now, during her time with Joseph, Margaret Jane II actually passed away from, I believe it's typhus fever. So fast forward some time, and Marianne now worked as a nurse in a hospital in Sunderland. So in 1865, Marianne actually married a patient, George Ward. Which obviously is very unethical, but you know, back then it was a different time. And yeah, she married her patient. So after being married for a year, George actually passed away. However, his doctor, even though George was suffering from illness, was quite surprised at how fast he passed away. He did not expect it. He did not expect George to pass that fastly. And once again, Marianne also collected the life insurance money, which she does a lot in this. So in 1866, Marianne actually got a new job as James Robinson's housekeeper. And a month after she was hired, James's baby actually died from gastric fever. And James turned to Marianne for comfort, and she became pregnant. Now, while all of this was going on, Marianne's mother became ill with hepatitis and sadly passed at the age of 54. And her daughter, that was from her marriage to William, moved in with her and James. But soon after she moved in, she developed severe stomach pain and sadly died, as did two of James's children. All three of them were buried in the last week of April and the first week of May in 1867, and Marianne collected the life insurance for her daughter with William. So the 11th of August 1867, James and Marianne actually got married, and their first child was born in November 1867. However, in February the following year, became ill and sadly died. And on the 18th of June 1869, their second child, George, was born. So James had become suspicious of Marianne due to her insistence of a life insurance policy. I guess back then it wasn't as big as what it is now for us, but yeah, she really insisted on it, and he was growing more and more suspicious. He actually discovered that she'd run up a debt of £60. Now back then that was obviously quite a lot. And she'd also stolen £50 and had planned to bank it. Now, James was obviously very upset about this, and then he learned that she'd been forcing his older children to sell household valuables. And as soon as he learned this, he threw her out the house and retained custody of their child, George. So now Marianne is homeless, and she's living on the street until her friend introduces her to her brother, Frederick. Now, Frederick had 4 children, but sadly lost 2 prior to meeting Marianne. And his sister acted as like a kind of mother figure to his remaining 2 children. However, late March in 1870, his sister sadly passed away. So she's sadly passed away, but unfortunately I couldn't find out how or anything like that. And this left Mary Ann to console Frederick, and as you guessed it, she became pregnant. And she actually became pregnant for the 12th time by the time that she was pregnant with Frederick's baby. So they married in September 1870 and their son was born in 1871. So not long after, Mary Ann learned that her ex-lover, Joseph, was single and only lived 30 miles away. She rekindled the romance and convinced her new family to move closer to him. I don't know how she did that, but she did. From what I was like reading up on her and everything, it seems like she got her way quite a lot. She was very convincing. No one really suspected her for anything. They all just thought she was very sweet and innocent. So once they moved closer to Joseph, Frederick suddenly died that December of gastric fever, and Mary Ann got the life insurance for him and 2 of his sons. So soon after that, Frederick became Mary Ann's lodger, and she gained employment as a nurse once again. So Frederick Jr., which I couldn't find out if that was Mary Ann's son or her stepson, died in 1872, and Robert died soon after that. Joseph became ill and he had gastric fever, and he sadly died just after he revised the will in Mary Ann's favour though. So he literally put everything in her favour and then was gone very soon after that. I'm surprised like no one kind of like caught on in a way. You know, this woman's had many husbands, many lovers, many friends die, and no one seems to have caught on to that. Okay, so I just finished off my eyeliner and everything. I'm just gonna quickly put on my primer. Again, I will link videos of how I do my base makeup and everything for you guys. So shortly after Joseph died, Mary Ann's kind of like downfall began. So this is where things all started to go wrong for her, and how she ended up like getting arrested basically. So Mary Ann was asked by a parish official if she would help nurse a woman, as this woman had smallpox. Now Mary Ann complained that Charles, so Charles was her stepson, and he was from her marriage to Frederick. So she started complaining that he was in her way. So she asked the parish official, Thomas Wright, if he could have Charles committed to the workhouse. Now the workhouse is an institution that was for people that couldn't support themselves, and it would give them accommodation and work. So she asked if he could have him committed to this, and Thomas said that Thomas told Mary Ann that she would have to go with him, which obviously she didn't really like that answer. Now Thomas also worked as West Auckland's assistant coroner, which I'm not sure if Mary Ann actually knew that or not, it's not clear. But Mary Ann went on to say to Thomas that Charles was sick, and she said to Thomas, and I quote, "I won't be trouble long, he will go like the rest of the Cotton family." So now 5 days later, Marianne comes back and she sees Thomas and tells him that Charles has passed away. Now Thomas went to the village police and convinced the doctor to not sign the birth certificate until the death could be investigated. So Thomas kind of knew that something was up. Like, she said that, and literally 5 days later she comes back saying that he's died. And I think that he felt that straight away it was not a coincidence.
I saw no shadow, I looked around, searched every building and home that I found. I saw no shadow, but felt a glow, the warmth inside me.
So after Charles's death, Mary's first visit was to the insurance office, and that is when she learned that there would be no payout until a death certificate was issued. Now Marianne was obviously very upset by this. As you know, that's what she likes to do. She likes to seemingly so poison people, or get rid of them to get the insurance money. Now an inquest was held and the jury came back that Charles died of natural causes, and Mary had said that Thomas was just making allegations against her because she refused his advances. So even though the verdict came back as natural causes, the local news still got hold of the story, and once they did some digging, and then they started finding out that Marianne had moved around northern England, and that she lost many people. She'd lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, 11 children, and they'd all died of stomach fevers. So with this news floating around, there was obviously a lot of questions. So obviously this grew a lot of suspicion, and Dr. William Kilburn, who attended Charles, actually kept some samples. So he began testing the samples. And the test came back and showed that the samples contained arsenic in them. So when he found this out, he immediately reported his findings to the police. The police then arrested Marianne and charged her with Charles's murder. However, the trial had to be postponed while she delivered her 13th and final baby, and that was a little girl named Margaret Edith Quick Manning Cotton. It's a bit of a mouthful, but you know. So I just did my like mascara, like eyeshadow underneath my eyes, and just some powder off camera. So now it's 1873 and Mary Ann's trial begins. So her trial starts on the 5th of March. So her defence was handled by Mr. Thomas Campbell Foster. He argued that Charles inhaled arson, like the arsenic, through the dye that was in the green wallpaper that was in the family home, and that is what killed Charles. So the jury went away and they came back after 90 minutes with a verdict. So after 90 minutes they came back and their verdict was guilty. They did not believe the defence's argument, and they thought that Marianne had killed Charles. So Marianne gets sentenced and sent away. And she gets sentenced to being hung. So Marianne was hung on the 24th of March 1873. However, she didn't actually die from her neck being snapped from the rope. She died due to strangulation. So basically the rope was rigged too short and it strangled her to death, and that's what actually killed her, not by her neck breaking, which is normally what happens when you get hung by death sentence. And yet a lot of people think that her rope being rigged too short was like on purpose, basically. So out of 13 children that Marianne had, only 2 survived. So the first child being Margaret Edith Quick Manning Cotton, and the second child being George, who she had when she was married to James. So yes, basically, even though it looked like at first all the children and her husband, lover, everyone had gastric fever, it turned out that they actually didn't, and she was poisoning them with arsenic. And because they had such similar symptoms, no one kind of looked into it or caught on until Thomas Riley. So yeah, I hope you all really enjoyed this video. Sorry I haven't done one in ages. I will be doing another one very soon, hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks time. I'll be doing another installment because I know you guys really like these. Thank you all for watching. Bye guys.